Hi everybody, welcome to the Stamperia Blue Dream mini album tutorial series designed for Scrap and Create. If you are new to the tutorial series, all of the Blue Dream papers available on the Scrap and Create website are linked in the description box below, so head over there to pick up your papers to follow along with the tutorial. Now we've already built our base of our album. We're now working on decorating our pages using the Blue Dream papers. So stay tuned as we begin decorating our pages. Before we begin decorating page 1, I need to cut down 3 papers from my 12 by 12 sheets to finish off the last couple of pages that we already made. So you'll notice when I was constructing the pages, I showed you the actual 8 by 8 page that I was going to feature on that page, except for once I ran out of those 8 by 8s, I need to go into the 12 by 12. So I've got this one here first. I'm going to use this image here on that final page, page number 6 on the front side. That is the pocket, and we're going to fussy cut this so that the center is cut out, but make this a frame. So I'm going to use this corner here. Now I'm going to cut this to an 8 by 8 square. So I'm going to start this direction here because I want this bottom right hand corner. So I'm just going to go 8 inches from the right hand corner and then 8 inches from the bottom. And now I have my 8 by 8 paper. I'm going to use this 12 by 12 for the back side of my final page, that envelope page. So this is what the other side looks like. It doesn't really matter where we cut. We're going to cut right through that clock. So you can kind of decide if you like these images or this or this or this and kind of save the rest of it if you choose to do so. So I am going to just go ahead and put this in my cutter, and I'm going to cut the top left corner off of this page. So again, just cutting this at an 8 by 8 square so that I have that piece when I go to decorate that page. So now I have my 8 by 8 square for that. Now the final page I'm going to use is this one, but I'm going to be using this side, and this is actually for page 5, the center of the flaps. It is not 8 by 8 though. It is going to be 7 by 7, so this paper needs to be 6 3/4 by 6 3/4. I want to save this image though, so I'm actually going to cut this, and I'm going to cut it from this side. So I'm going to cut 6 3/4 by 6 3/4. So now this will be part that I'm going to use on that page, and I'll have this with all this to use both sides on my decorative papers for the other pages. So now that I have all of these pages cut, I'm going to set these aside for those other pages, and we'll begin with page number 1 and begin adding our decorative paper, so stay tuned. Now we're going to begin adding our decorative papers, so I have page 1 in front of me. Before we begin though, I want to go over a few things so that you understand how this is going to work. I like to use white paper, and I use presentation paper. It's a little bit thicker than copy paper. I add white photo spaces or photo mats to my spreads. So for example, there will be on the inside of here a white photo mat. If you don't like the look of that white photo mat, you can substitute with a different paper. But like I mentioned in the supply video, if you're going to be substituting, you're probably going to need more of that decorative paper because you'll need to have more to cover it. So a few other things to think about are I'm going to be using some of that solid colored cardstock in places. If you don't like the look of that either, you can also add more of your decorative paper. You just have to plan in advance and make sure that you do buy more of the paper. As I go through the instructions, I'm going to be giving you cutting measurements for the pieces, and I'll show you where they go, but I will not be gluing them on camera. So I'll add my glue, I'll put the pieces on, then I'll come back and show you what they look like placed on the page, unless for some reason I need to show you how this is glued on. So it's best to start and stop the video using that pause button so that you can cut your pieces and add them on and then move on to the next part of the tutorial. The first piece that I'm going to cut measures 4 3/4 by 8 inches. I'm using the lighter colored solid cardstock here. And I'm going to be placing this right here on the top of this page, leaving just a very tiny little border just after that score line. And then I'll be lining all these edges up so that this will actually tuck into my pocket. Then we'll adhere this down to make this a pocket. I'm not sure how well you can see this on camera, but I did use my ink around the edges of this paper. So remember, if you are using distress ink, go ahead and ink your piece now. We're going to put this on, and then we're going to add some pieces up here next. Now that I have this piece on, I'm going to take my adhesive and apply just a little bit on the sides here on this bottom flap. And then I'm going to flip this up and seal it to make my pocket. Now from this piece here, this is the 12 by 12 with the clock image. This piece down here was the bottom border strip. I cut this piece to 7/8 of an inch, and then I cut it down to 8 inches. I did ink my edges, and I'm going to add this here to the page just to give it a little bit of extra decoration. You can add this on your page anywhere you want it to be, but I'm going to start mine about 1 1/4 inches down from the top of that page. Now that I have my decorative paper on, we're going to move up here to these 2 flaps. We're going to cut 2 pieces. I'm using the darker blue colored cardstock. These pieces measure 4 3/8 by 5 1/4. I did use my distress ink on those edges. I'm going to place one here in the center of this one and one here in the center of this one. And then I've cut 2 of my cut apart cards. I'm going to place this one here. It's going to actually be underneath the other one. I'm going to have this flip the opposite direction. I'm using this side, that way if you would want a journaling spot, you could use that as journaling. If you like the other side, you can go ahead and flip that over. This is going to go in the center, and then this one I'm going to put in the center here. So I'm going to add all of these on, then we'll move to the inside. Now that I have my flaps decorated, we're going to move to the inside here. And I've just cut 2 pieces of my paper. I've inked the edges just so that it'll stand out a little bit more on my cream colored background. These measure 4 3/8 by 5 1/4. I'm going to place one on each side of my flaps. Now, one thing that I do when I'm using lighter weight paper like this copy paper, this presentation paper, I apply a very, very thin layer, not a lot. So I'm really careful about how much adhesive I put on this, and I only apply it on this outside section. And then I add just a little teeny tiny bit in the center and then place it down. There's supposed to be a photo that goes over top of it, so you won't see that little spot in the center. It'll be covered. But until then, you won't see any glue spots either underneath of the paper. So that's how I apply down all of my photo mats. Now that I have my photo mats on, I'm going to come up here I have one of the lighter pieces of cardstock cut to 1 3/4. This is about 6 1/4 inches. It doesn't need to be quite this long, but that's just the piece that I had. I'm going to actually turn this sideways just to make it a little bit easier for me to work with and see. Now I'm going to line this up so that the bottom edge of my piece goes to the top edge of my paper. Then I'm going to take my pencil and trace right along this piece. And now you can use your pencil again if you want to, and you can draw another line inside of here, or you can just take this and cut this with your scissors if you feel confident that you can do that, creating just a small little border around this. So I'll do it this way first, just so you can see what this would look like. So we're just going ahead and just very tiny little bit adding that small border that will cut, so that once this piece is on, it'll have that little cream border around it like the rest of the pieces we're putting down. Then I'm just going to take my fussy cutting scissors and cut right along this line that I drew. And when I add this piece here, I have that nice border and it's straight across here. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere this piece down, and then we'll come into the center. Now that this piece is down, we're going to place pieces for the center. I've cut mine a little smaller, not even thinking I cut them the size of my flaps. So I'm going to give you slightly different measurements that'll work better than mine. So the white photo mat in the center, you are going to cut this to 4.5 by 4.5 and place it in the center of the page. Now these pieces, they came from the side of this paper here, and you're going to cut these pieces to 1 3/4 by 4.5. And these are going to go on each side. So my recommendation when you're placing pieces like this is to place these 2 pieces on the side first, and then place your piece in the center so that you can have it positioned with a uniform border around it. Now you'll notice when I have my pieces on, the border up here and the top and bottom borders are a little bit larger than I want, because this piece is actually a little bit wider than these 2 flaps. When you put your pieces on, your papers will actually be up here to where you will have a smaller border around the entire piece. Next, I'm going to add some embellishments to this to make it a little bit more decorative. So I'm going to be using some of my ephemera pieces for this. Now these have the adhesive back on them, so you can do one of 2 things. I like to put my pieces down so that later on a photo can slide behind them. So for example, if I put this piece here, I want to be able to have that open at the top so the photo will slide behind it. With this adhesive backing, we need to be really careful though. So you can peel the adhesive backing off, place this on cardstock and fussy cut around it, or you can do what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to be removing part of my background paper and leaving the rest of the background paper on my piece. Now later, if I have my photos down, I can take that backing off and have this stick directly to my photos as well. So I've marked where I need to take my backing off. And I'm just going to peel this part off and cut right where I need it to still stay on. I'm gonna do the same thing with this smaller section here. Now I normally just add this to cardstock and fussy cut, but I'm trying not to add too much bulk to my pages. So I'm going to make sure now that all of the sticky part is on my cardstock and not on my white paper. And then I'm going to press this sticker down. So now, if I have a photo, it will slide all the way up underneath of there and I can place it in my album. I'm going to use this little sticker down here. And so everything is going to be peeled off except for half of the top part of the glass. So that's the only part that I'm going to keep on. So I'll peel the rest of it back and then cut it off and place this one down on my cardstock. Now this is from the 8x8 paper. I'm going to take this. This was on the final page of the paper pad, all those cut aparts. And I'm just going to place this here. Making sure that it is centered from left to right. And next, we're going to fold these flaps in, but we're going to do something to these a little different. I've cut some of my twine to about 22 inches. Now I'm going to wrap this, I'm going to leave a tail, hold it in the center, and then I'm going to wrap this around here twice, and on the back side it's going to be a crisscross. I'll come back to that back side in just a second. If you don't do well with small ends to your ties, you can always cut this a little bit longer to about 24 inches. But I don't like to waste a lot of my stuff, so I just cut mine to what I'm going to need. And I'm just going to now loop this under so that it's crossed on the front side. And then I'm going to tie a knot. So now I can scoot this knot to wherever I want it to be. But I want this on the back side to have that X. And I'm going to put it kind of close to my edge. And the photo then will slide right underneath of that and just add a little bit of decoration or color. And then I'm going to leave that like this. You can trim these edges if you want them to be trimmed. Then I'm going to take one more of my ephemera pieces. And on this one, I'm going to peel the entire backing piece off. And I'm going to place this over here, just on the side of that cut apart image. And I'm going to leave this side like this, flipping this open. This one is a little bit of a longer piece. It's about 24 inches. You'll see the difference when I go to wrap this around. There's more it's going to be a little bit easier to wrap. So when you're cutting your pieces, you can always cut them longer to make it easier. So I've got my pieces here. Crossed on the back side. And then I'm going to tie these in a knot. I am going to trim these tails because they're a little longer than I want them to be. And then just like on the other side, I'm going to come here from the back side, move these over to the side. And then come onto the front side and see what that looks like too. And now I have my flaps with just a little bit of extra decoration. It does add a little bit of bulk here to the page, so you just have to be really careful. You don't want to use a really thick twine here, so it needs to be really thin. The last thing we're going to do is add a photo mat for the pocket. For the larger pocket, we need one piece of cardstock that measures 5 inches by 6 1/4 inches. 2 pieces that measure 3/4 by 6 inches. I've taken both of these from this piece here. This was the 12 by 12 clock paper. Just use some scraps of that. One piece is going to go here at the top. The other piece is going to go at the top on the back side. And I have 2 white photo mats from my presentation paper that measures 4 inches by 6 inches. And then one of these is going to go here on the front. The other one's going to go on the back side. Now that my photo mat is complete, I will place it in my larger pocket here. I almost forgot I wanted to add this postage stamp from the ephemera pack over here. So we've got this ephemera piece here. I'm going to add one here as well. So that is going to complete this spread. So we can go ahead and close everything on the page, close that swing tab, and now we'll flip over and start the back side of page 1. And if you remember, this is the paper that I'm using as my inspiration. So I'm going to first cut this. This flap here is 3 inches, so I need to cut this piece on the side. I'm going to cut mine to 2 7/8 of an inch. And I'm going to place this here. Now, I'm going to make sure that there is more of a border on the right-hand side and just this very teeny tiny little border here. I'm going to take the rest of the piece and I'm going to place it here like this. So now I have my piece where you see that small separation in between them. So there is a delineation where the pocket is and the flap is, but it's not going to make it harder to see this entire picture. I'm going to adhere both of these pieces down. Once the paper is on, we're going to open up and come inside. First, we are going to take 2 white photo mats. They measure 4 inches by 5 inches. They're going to go here and here with a uniform border around them and a small space in between. Then I've taken this paper here from the 12 by 12. This is the back side of the front cover. I've cut this to 5 3/4 by 8 inches, and I'm going to place this here just next to the score line. I'm not going to leave a gap here because I've already got a gap on my flap here and I don't want this to be too large. Once I have this on, I'm going to then make this into my pocket. But first I'm going to adhere these pieces down. From this same paper that I cut this strip here off the top, just even with the yellow border piece. I cut it to 8 inches and then I cut it into 2 pieces that are 4 inches. And what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to be adhering this down just on the sides, or the top and the bottom, I guess I should say, of each of these pieces. So just a little teeny tiny bit of adhesive here, not a lot. And then I'm going to place this right on my photo mat, just to give it a little bit of that decorative paper and some color over here. Do the same thing with this bottom one. Now you can put this over here if you want to mix it up a little bit, but I'm going to place mine in one straight line. And then I've got one of my die cut pieces that I'm going to place here in the center. Taking the back off only part of my piece. So then my photo will tuck up underneath of the pieces of the flower. Now coming over here, we need to get our tag that we're going to use as our closure. Closing this flap, we're going to place this here. Now I don't want this to be able to slide all the way down. So once this is adhered, I'm going to have my other part of the pocket be right about here. So I'm going to take this, add my adhesive. This is about 5 1/4 inches from the top of the flap. Then I'm going to add my adhesive at the top and add my adhesive at the bottom. So I'm essentially creating 2 pockets out of this flap. And so now my tag will tuck into this one, holding that page closed. Now for my tag, I have used my metal Graphic 45 tag die to cut my piece, and I've just used my darker colored regular cardstock to cover this. And if you don't have the metal die, you can still cover these just cutting a rectangle that measures 4 1/4 by 4 inches. Then use a corner rounder on these corners. You won't have this piece covered, but the rest of it will. Then I've got one of my cards that I've cut out of the paper, and I'm just going to place this here right in the center. I've left the back blank, that way a photo can go on here, or there can be some journaling, whatever you would want to put on there. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the center, and then we'll close our page with the tag. Now I'm going to close my flap and place my tag right in my pocket here to hold it closed. And for now, I'm not going to place anything in my loops because I want to see how much space I have between my pages once I get these in the album, because I don't want to add extra bulk and not have enough between my pages. So I might just leave them plain like that. Now I've got one of the little cut aparts from the 8x8 paper. I just backed it on some of the cream cardstock and then cut that out. And I'm going to add this piece down here just for a little bit of decoration. And then I have one of the little teeny tiny shells from the ephemera assortment. And I'm just going to place this up here. on the corner so it's off of the corner and onto the page. Then I've got more shells here that I'm going to layer up down here in this bottom corner. So I've just selected 3 different shell images that I liked. I'm going to start with my first one and just lay it down, but I'm not going to press it down yet. That way, if I need to, I can arrange these until I like the look of them. Then I'm just going to place these in a little cluster and then press them down on my page. So now I have my entire page complete and it's ready to go into the album. Next, I'm going to bring my album cover in, open up, and we're going to place our page in the album. So we're going to be placing it on the first hinge here on the left-hand side. And we're going to be placing these on this first half-inch section. So I'm going to add my adhesive to the first one, the top side of it, where the front of my page is going to be. So I hope you can see that this only has adhesive on it up to that score line. There's none past that score line. I'm going to open my page up. And then lay the page down so that it is right next to that score line. It doesn't go over the score line, and then my page needs to also be straight at the top and the bottom. Then I'm going to press this down using my bone folder so that I know it's adhered. Now I'm going to flip this over and open my page up and burnish it this direction. You can see it a little bit easier without all that page bulk. So it's now in my book on my hinge. I'm going to seal up the bottom part of my pocket just by adding some adhesive. And then I'm going to add my adhesive here to this back side, just on that first half-inch hinge section, not going past that score line. We're going to close everything up nice and tight. Press the page together. And then use my bone folder to burnish the side and the bottom edge. So now I have my first page in my album. I've got my hinge extension that's going to help this to lay flat when there are multiple pages in it. But it's also, whenever the book is up like this, you'll notice that it doesn't meet this edge, so there's plenty of room in there. Okay, so this is it for decorating the first page in our album. So stay tuned for the next video on the series where we will be working on page number 2. And if you are new to the tutorial series, don't forget to check out the description box below where all of the Blue Dream papers are available on the Scrap and Create website. All those links in the description box make it easy for you just to click on those and purchase them.